I don't think any of these three gentlemen need any introduction, but I will try it. Óscar Mendez, he's CEO of Stratio, president of Paradigma, head of the Big Data Spain conference. Jim Weber, alumni speaker who couldn't make it last year. I remember two previous talks by Jim Weber in previous editions. He used to mention Nick Farage, this British politician who, it was a joke when Jim made fun of him in front of us, and suddenly Nick Farage changed the world with the Brexit situation. So perhaps it's not a joke anymore, Jim?
Joke, I'm terribly wrong there, I'm afraid.
Yes, that's right. So, and then we have Andy Petrella. He has just been speaking here. I think the profile of these three panelists is very diverse, but because of that, perhaps good topic will arise. I would like to kickstart this by asking a question. So we have all this situation about privacy concerns. The Germans are very adamant that their data protection should prevail in Europe. We have the GDPR situation. And Amparo Alonso yesterday mentioned that 85% of the US citizens can be identified individually just with big data existing platforms. So this is a growing concern. The elephant is in the room, if you want. I would like you to provide your view on this and how things can turn positive from this apparent concern. Could you please start, Óscar?
Well, really no, but I will. I think this is really important because data protection is something that all of us, we care about. But then, in my opinion, this is a personal opinion, when politicians make rules that involve technology, normally they don't do it very well. And that is a big, big problem. So GDPR, the concept is good, it's positive to protect the data of European citizens. But the way to do it, in my opinion, is completely wrong. The requirements you will have to fulfill for GDPR, for the European companies, are so big that the extra cost is not something small. It's a percentage. And in this market, in this world, a small percentage of competitive disadvantage against companies that are in other regions, because here we are not talking about countries, we are talking about blocks, countries associations. If all the European countries have this limitation and this disadvantage to compete against US companies or to compete against Chinese companies in which the data of the citizens belong to the government and therefore to the companies that are associated with the government, you cannot compete. It is a wrong way to do it. The concept is good, the way to do it is really bad.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry to be so, it's just to put some action at the beginning.
I think, Andy, this is waiting for you to maybe give your view.
Oh, yeah, I can add on top of this that what's really interesting in GDPR is that actually they have administrative fines. That's why we talk about it. Because regulations are there for 15 years. So we had regulation about data protection. They were there, but you had to go to the court. You had to run this process, and maybe you will be accused, and then you will have to pay something. The problem here is that the authorities can send you this note with the fine in it, and you may have to pay a large bucket of your turnaround. So the thing is that the authorities are there for 15 years, and they had to do it in order for the companies to take position and do something about the privacy. So that's why now we talk about it. So that means that they should have been doing something for 15 years already. So they are lagging behind, of course, and the reasons you mentioned them is because it takes time and it takes a chunk of your money that you can invest in research and innovation instead. However, they were there. And ultimately, what hiding GDPR on top of the previous regulation is that now they just want you to be accountable, right? So they ask you, okay, so do pretty much whatever you do with the data, but at least be able to, please show that you can explain it. So far, it's not clear how to do it. It's a problem. So there is this group 29 which is working on that, so it's starting to become a little bit clearer. But I mean, it's legitimate to ask enterprise, okay, I provide my data, but can you please explain me what you do with it? And if I'm refused to have this mortgage, why? Can you explain me why I didn't get it? Right? Oh, it's a mobile, so you cannot know. Yes, actually, I should be able to know, because if there is something I can change, right? If it's my income, if it's my health or whatever, if it's because I'm smoking, right, I can change in order to get the mortgage later.
Yes. Jim?
So I'm going to step out of GDPR. I think it's super important, but it's a compliance issue. And so I'm not tremendously excited by compliance, as many normal humans. But there are two things that really get me searching for an appropriately unsweary verb, extraordinarily fucking pissed off about privacy in the one is the exploitation of privacy, and one is the invasion of privacy. So I'll do invasion first, right? Given enough money and tools that are available to a small and typically wealthy part of our countries, our globe, our citizenry, we can be manipulated without knowing about it through today's platform. No one's shining a light there. I'm not talking about mass manipulation through Facebook, but I'm talking about more cynical manipulation, the kind of Cambridge Analytica style manipulation. That all goes on so secretly. As a citizen, I have no way of seeing into that privacy, right? So I actually do want more transparency there. The flip of it, kind of people using privacy, I'm not talking about you and I to hide that stupid drunken photo where I've got my, my backside hanging out of a hotel room and a firework coming out of it, whatever. Like kind of, human fallibility. I'm talking about what people systemically abuse privacy. I live in the 9th biggest tax haven in the world. That's the United Kingdom, an OECD country, and it subsidizes a whole bunch of other tax havens. It also geographically lives cheek by jowl with 2 other tax havens. Hi Ireland, hi Netherlands, how you doing? You're ripping off the citizens. And people are exploiting privacy to be able to deliberately, legally manage their money in an offshore way to tax efficiently rip us off. And I think that level of privacy, that's where we need a whole bunch of sunshine in to disinfect that. And those of you that saw Marcabra speak yesterday, she tells us how her organization, which is small, takes a bunch of open source technology, glues it together, and shines a light inside of that nest of fetid privacy. And I think there's one element of privacy where I want less, and it's in that kind of artificial structure which robs you and I of schools and hospitals and public services. So GDPR, important. Not being ripped off by a private load of plutocrats, more important. There you go for an opener. Yay, love you guys.
Óscar, maybe you want to...
No, I agree about tax and fiscal paradise and all this. Everybody agree, of course.
Some people don't, though, right? There's a small number of people that
the ones that
upset.
are getting the benefits.
Lewis Hamilton and his private jet doesn't agree, I'm sure.
And yesterday we were talking about this because the people behind discovering and getting all this information, they are the real heroes of this society. So if we would have more people doing that, the world will improve for sure. So I agree about that. The privacy and the lights and the focus will be directed to the real ones that are jeopardizing the improvement of the society and our schools and hospitals and everything. And the focus are not there. And you should ask, why? And then the focus are here, and the way it is done, as I said, it is my point. I agree about data citizens' privacy. I agree that my data is my data, and if Google is using it, I should be able to ask for Google to move my data to this other company because I want to have better services and products in this company with the data that they have recollected about me. And this is healthy. My point is that the way we are doing it, for example, about the algorithms, the open boxes and black boxes. I understand that you have to be able to demonstrate what algorithms are you using, machine learning, deep learning, whatever, to say that there is nothing that is incorrectly politically, because maybe you are not giving that mortgage to that guy because she's a female or she's black or white or whatever. I agree about that. The only point is that this should be something global, because if you put these limitations here and we cannot use black box algorithms and artificial intelligence for the banks and the insurance company, and with this you are getting a real benefit, the banks in China will have those benefits. And if you see the top of the 20 biggest banks in the world for the last 20 years, in the top 5, there were not any Chinese bank. And now I think in the top 5 there are 2 or 3. Why? Because we are not playing with the same rules. And with that game, it is very difficult to win.
Yeah.
So I asked Owen O'Malley, co-founder of Hortonworks and in charge of security for Hive, about a specific case where he working in terms of removing a certain node of personal information out of a database or system or platform. And he answered that he remembered a case where, yes, his client had asked him to remove certain individual data points out of the system, which is a major challenge, not only technical, also in terms of philosophical, if you want. If you remove the data person out of a whole platform, how do you rehash or how do you recalculate the segmentation? How you adapt the database to the gap? No. In your experience, could you tell us if technically we are talking about something that is feasible at all? I mean, are we getting in a situation where we think we can do it, but we cannot? We are not prepared. We didn't make the decisions to say, okay, removing the data, personal data out of a system means this and that.
If you want, I can jump.
Yes, please.
Because I have been a little bit aggressive at the beginning about GDPR, but about this for technology companies, I think that for Neo4j, for big data platforms and so on, at the end, that is, for us, it is good. So I am saying, okay, I don't like this because we should be playing all with the same rules globally, but for technology companies, it is super good because legacy technologies, 20th century technologies, cannot cope with the challenge. They cannot do it. A relational database have relations and have indexes, and these indexes have been built for years. So if you want to take some data out of that equation, then this customer will go out, and then the products that he is using should also go out, and then the dashboards and the reporting that you have and your historical data will not match, and with legacy technology, you will not be able to solve that. So with the new technologies, with Neo4j, with the relations, the graphical way they can manage, they are a lot more dynamic. So we can do and solve those problems or incorporate features in the products that will solve the problem. So for us, that is good, but the answer, in my opinion, is that with the legacy technology big banks, big insurance company, telecom, and retailers have, it will be a real challenge to be able to do it.
Guys, you can ask questions through the hash BDS17 on Twitter. So feel free to ask any question to the audience. So Jim, what's your take? Do you think technically, I mean, graph databases, kind of, yeah, I mean.
So I mean, Óscar did my job for me then, so I'm going to stay out of thank you, checks in the mail. So I'm going to stay out. I mean, look, most modern data tech, the mechanics of removing records are straightforward, right? In a graph, you would cut out your bit, fine, whatever. I think what's more interesting is, mechanically in computer science or in software engineering, we have these things called continuations, right? They are a snapshot of a process in state in time, so that it can be picked up, moved, and restarted over here, right? So that you'll see some of these in even some of your favorite frameworks in some of your programming languages. They're not tremendously esoteric. What we're missing is the equivalent of that for data. So I'm currently working with this cloud platform. I effectively want to say, stop. Give me my continuation, which has the side effect of removing me from your systems of record. And I now want to place my continuation over here with this cloud provider. And that, as a citizen, someone who owns my data, is incredibly beneficial. But effectively, I can't see the economic reason why the two cloud providers would collaborate around a continuation format for me so that I could own my data without pressure coming from a third party, nominally blocks or sufficiently powerful national governments to do that. So I think there is, mechanically, I see no problem in doing this. Citizen ownership stuff, no problem. Trivializing a bunch of difficult problems, including crypto, but it's not an unknown problem, right? It's a soluble problem. I don't see the will in doing it. I think I worry that will be obfuscated by people with an interest in maintaining your data to prevent these kind of things from happening.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe if I can. There are a few things about it which is interesting. As far as I understand, GDPR does not enforce that we have to remove data. There is a TTL, of course, which makes sense, right? You don't have to keep data forever, right? That would mean that you have to be able to delete data one way or another. But if you have the notion of consent, right? And which can say, okay, I want you to process my data for that and that, or I accept that and that and that. That's it, right? So besides that, just make sure that you mask my data for whatever you do. But the thing is that if technically it's hard to delete the data, you're not obliged to. You have to show that you are able to mask the data afterwards. So that's my understanding of the regulation. So I've seen a few lawyers complementing on that, and maybe there will be other recommendation from the Group 29 again to say, okay, so in this case, in case of HDFS Parquet file, how can you remove the data? So it's pretty hard as well, right? Yeah. Even with new data stores. So if it's hard, if it can be done, but you have to reprocess the data, remove the data, restore it again, and then you may have to stop processes, which doesn't make sense. At least it costs some money. So maybe you can explain it. Okay, so this can be removed, but we have masked it that way, that way, that way. So that's the interesting part with that. And also it helps, of course, in switching from one technology to the other, because in DB2, right, or Oracle database, to name them, I mean, you have columns that are awkward. The names are totally absurd, right? So how can you figure out where the data is? And afterwards, and that's the part that they like in GDPR, is that you have data coming in, you know where there are stores initially, but what happened the intermediate data set afterwards? What do you do with them? Do you mask the data? Do you also delete the data, and so on? Not only the relationship, but also the transformation of the data, which is even harder for people because they may not even know where the data is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree about that. I didn't think when I was answering about that point, because it is not only the data, it is the transformations of data in the companies are huge. And most of the companies, the lineage of data, they are not having or solving any lineage of the data. So you don't know where that data that should be encrypted or whatever has been used. And this is a big problem. It's not technical. And here we are talking about data governability. Data governability in the companies is even a bigger problem than the technological problem, because it is something that goes from business glossaries, to technical dictionaries, to technical and business metadata, to all the data that you have in your companies. But that data that you have in your companies is in 100, 2,000, 10,000 different data stores. So how to have data governability and lineage in all those 1,000 data stores? It is almost impossible to solve that. And then about that, transformations, that is a real challenge. That is the challenge.
So I'm more optimistic than you, Óscar. So uncharacteristic.
I am so glad to
I know,
have
look,
optimistic people
there's not
around.
much to be optimistic about in Brexit land, but on this one I'm going to be optimistic. So I already see some financial institutions effectively mapping out the trail of provenance, right? Because the regulatory environment demands it.
Yes.
Now, instead of having a difficult reporting season, they can effectively click a button and a report is generated that this data came from this XML web service into this Oracle database, was manipulated by these people that went into this document database that blah, 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 right? So they can map that out. So at a kind of tactical level, I already see people employing technology to try to get a handle on this. I don't think there's an overarching vision yet, but then there is an overarching vision coming from an unlikely source. I know that DARPA, the American military research agency, is funding a platform program on transparent computing. So knowing at which points in your computer system, in fact in your end-to-end system, things are touching your data, what's being done to them, so you can actually map the entire historical provenance of your data at scale. Now, it's a research project at the moment, right? So I can't install it, sudo apt-get transparency kind of thing. Don't know why it needs sudo, because it's military, I suppose. It also installs some spyware. But once that research comes to fruition, and it's 3 to 5 years out, we're hoping to see hardware and software, the whole stack in a way, be able to give you a completely transparent view of provenance of the whole system over time. And then we are getting towards the kind of assailing some of the problems that you alluded to, which makes me optimistic for once, rather than the usual technology curmudgeon that I am.
Perfect.
Yeah,
We only have some few minutes left, and I would like to end also on a high note, okay? Because we've been mentioning the keywords at problems, governance, issues. I mean, I've been seeing that some journalists came to Big Data Spain. You have been interviewed. The question sometimes is about journalists trying to understand what it is all about. What is big data? I mean, it's not a fashion anymore. It's not a buzzword anymore. But what it is left of it? What is it for? How can I use it? My brother asks me that. Probably your friends and relatives ask, what is this all about? So I remember a use case, and I would like maybe you to share one favorite case of big data analytics or artificial intelligence, something that is tangible, that help us communicate to the journalists and wider audiences. What are we doing really, and what are we doing it for? And I remember a use case by precisely Stratio. One data scientist explained to me that he was involved in a project where Spanish large free television channel is a network that has these celebrities programs interspersed with commercials, with some like 10 or 20 minutes long, even 20 minutes long commercials, and 20 minutes long program, actually. So your viewing time was like changing all the time in the slots. So the project was about trying to determine the optimal duration of those commercial intervals inside the whole slot of the program, so it could maximize the return for the advertisers, and it wouldn't alienate the TV viewers. And I found it very interesting. It was like, okay, I can't explain this. It is something that it goes far by itself. And it's a nice use of data science. Could you please mention a project that you like, that is easy to explain, and help us tell the journalists, I'm here for this reason. I'm here because television channels maximize their return, and because viewers still get stuck on their celebrities program, which is very important also. I don't want to minimize the importance of celebrities phenomenon. So please, Andy, maybe you have a favorite case?
I'd like to pick one of them. I don't know, genetics or geospatial, which one do you like? Genomics? Genomics or geospatial, which one you like?
First.
Genomics, all right. It's not my project, but I really liked it. It's from Berkeley. We used to do a lot of genomics back then. And actually using ADAM, which is a library on top of Spark, they were able to discover a bacteria in the ADN of a boy who was in the coma for several weeks. He has been put in coma because they couldn't discover why he had this brain ache for weeks. And actually, they were looking at different angles, but by using the ADN, not his ADN, but actually by looking at the ADN of the different bacteria that it had in the blood,
DNA.
they were able to detect which pills he had to.
The DNA sequence, actually.
The DNA sequence, of course, right.
Okay.
But the thing is that it's so hard to compute. It's a mess, right? DNA is like you shop and rewire everything in there. And it takes a lot of time to compute one DNA. So think about computing DNA about things you don't even know what they are. So you don't know what's in the blood. So it was a good case because after a week, then they could solve the problem for the boy. Otherwise, he would have been dead.
Okay. Very nice. Jim?
Well, it's the challenge is picking one, right, Andy? There's a lot of good stuff happening. But since you mentioned journalists, I'm going to pick on the obvious one, and that's Paradise Papers. If you want to explain the value of data to journalists, it's that we all leave our fingerprints everywhere, and we can use data technology to piece that stuff together. So Paradise Papers it's something that 10 years ago was proprietary to Google. You couldn't build it. But the rise of open source data tech means that we can build that stuff today. The ICIJ, the group that did the Paradise Papers expose, they're a small number of people. But they were able to glue together open source OCR, open source ETL, open source data dedupe, open source database, open source index, open source visualization, all this stuff to provide a really compelling view into the behaviors of certain wealthy individuals and certain extraordinarily wealthy companies. I think being able to explain to my mum, who is somewhat technically illiterate, that what I do means that we can show how rich people dodge their obligations to our communities. She understands that. She works in a school. The school is underfunded. The school has to ask parents if they can supply money for pens and paper. I live in a first world OECD country, by the way, right? I don't live in Somalia. This is a allegedly first world nation. And being able to share with her how we're starting to unpick that awful, immoral behavior. And she sees it on the TV, and she's like, that's what Jimmy does. She calls me Jimmy, right? You can't call me Jimmy. She can call me Jimmy. And like being able to bridge that gap between some like incredible technical computer science stuff and something that's impactful in like normal people's worlds is just amazing.
Okay.
Oh, checks in the mail, whoever keeps applauding.
So for me, I think that we have been talking about privacy data. I think that there are a lot of use cases that, but especially as a citizen, I want my data to be protected. But also, as a citizen, I want my data to be used if it is used to provide me better services and to improve my quality of life. So this is something hard balance to maintain. Then my favorite use case in the second one, I see with some of our customers globally, the big ones, the ones that are leading some of the markets, they are getting relations and making partnerships with leaders in other sectors to enrich the data with, of course, the data protection that you will need to know better the customers and then to provide better services according to the way those customers allow you to use their data. And so for me, one of the best use cases is everything about better profiling, better microsegmentation, lifetime events for the people. Normally, all the companies, you're using social demographic data. So if you are 22, then you will buy a house. No. If you are 22, maybe you will buy a house. So if you are a bank, you will target that one. But if you get divorced, you also will buy a house. So lifetime events, just to put an example, are very important. So better clustering, better microsegmentation to provide better services and products to the customers, as well as they want their data to be used, for me is one of the best use of data that you can do. And about this, it is quite curious because data protection, the laws are protecting, yes, but I don't know if you have seen the conditions of Google or Facebook or any of them. They are like, shoo. And with this new law, it will be not this. It will be like this, because they have explained they use a lot of things. When they were this, could you tell me who of you have read the conditions or the terms of Facebook of Google? Just with a hand. All of them. All this. No one. I haven't done it. When they are like this, you will read it. Even less. So for me, my use case is better use of data to provide better services and products to the customers, and trying to find out how to solve this problem about better data protection, and no one is going to read the conditions of the digital companies you are going to use.
Fantastic. I think it's a very interesting point. So we are running out of time to the point that we need to give way to our next session. It's been very interesting. I enjoyed every minute of it. It's awesome to have you here today. So thank you very much also. And please, thanks.
Thank you.